Welcome, everybody, to another Creative Finance Playbook podcast. I am your host, Jenn, and she's Joe, right? Now, we're having some fun today. Today, we're going to be talking about how to buy your first rental without a bank or credit score. And I know I'm throwing everybody off by that intro, but this is going to be a fun one to talk about because I feel like this has been a really relevant thing. I've heard from so many investors of, like, I'm either getting cut off from the banks, like what happened to you and I. I've had some people just say I can't even get bank qualified because all different types of reasons. So today we're going to really dive into how to get deals and how to find these deals when the banks say no. And I think that's really important, to kind of know that, because if you think about back in 2016, I remember we were borrowing out of one of our first property, or our fifth property actually, but it was the first one where we were having some adversity, where my friend at the bank was like, hey, Joe, you know what, 10 mortgages, we're going to cut you off. We're going to have some problems going down the road if you want more than 10 mortgages. But then I've also had some friends of mine who are like, hey, like I can't even get another rental because of my job with my debt and my income, but I still want to be able to get into this rental game. So how do we do that? So one small step at a time, I think, is key. And first of all, like, why do the banks say no? It's kind of, there's many different things to it. Sometimes you need a big down payment when you're going to the bank. If you're investing, it could be 20% down, sometimes more, right? So sometimes you don't have enough income to support that. Sometimes you don't have enough money to do it. And that's a lot of the times where I see people run into issues being an investor, is having that big down payment. And I think that would be the biggest challenge of all, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely hard to come up with 20% or more sometimes.
Yeah, because I've had many people say, hey, Joe, like, how am I going to get $70,000 to put this down on a property? Now the bank wants 8%. And then many times, too, they're going to look at your debt. They're going to look at your income. I think of when we used to do BRRRR, how long would that process take us?
Takes forever. Literally forever.
But it felt like it. How many times where I'm at work at the dealership and I'm like, the guy at the bank said what now? And he had to go, you were the one pulling all the forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I don't even know what they needed. It was just literally everything.
Yeah. And so one more form at a time. So it was a really slow process. And I think that was one of the troubles that we were having, is we were going to scale our business. So that's when I think when we found how to buy these properties without doing this way was truly the key. So like, why do banks say no? There's a whole list of reasons why.
Well, and it's also, I think, people telling the banks no at this point because they can't cash flow at these interest rates as it is. So it's also people who are tired of waiting on the sidelines and saying like, oh, I'll just wait until the rates come down. Well, the reality is they could come down a little bit, but there's still better options out there if you can just beat the banks.
Right. So then the bigger question, why would sellers say yes to this?
Well, that's it's a whole reason, like, for another podcast topic, I feel like.
Well, and that's really the thing we look at is like, so banks will say no, but like sellers, why would they say yes? To me, it's like, we're finding motivated sellers and they don't want that super low ball offer. A lot of these were like beautiful turnkey houses, but they had a real estate issue. They had some type of motivation coming into their life where this is a good option. And maybe it's not the best option for everybody. Many times I tell a seller, maybe it's a great option to list your house in the market, and maybe that's a better idea to do it.
Well, weird things happen. Literally just at lunch, we had a seller who, we bought his house a couple of years ago, and he moved, and he just bought another house.
Closed like 2 months ago.
Literally, yeah, New Year's Eve. And then he just got word that now he's getting relocated again. So if he tries to go and list it, like, what that would look like, I don't know, because he just bought the darn thing. So is he in another jam where we might be able to try to help him out again? Like, we were the first people that he turned to.
Yeah.
So, situations are sometimes unavoidable and almost like you can't understand them until you're in them. And so it's hard for the average person who may not be relocated, or, family sickness comes up or something along those lines, where like this is really a pinch that people need help.
Yeah, and it's that just happened like an hour ago, was that message. And he's calling and he's a little bit freaked out. He's like, I just bought the house the end of the year, and my job, he's like, they're screwing me over, because now he's like, I got to move back to Florida. And he lives like on the West Coast right now of the USA. So, it's a far move for him. And he just made the move. When did we buy his house? How many years ago?
That was in the end of 2022.
So we've had his house for 2 years. He's moved, got qualified for the new home. bought it, finally just closed on it, and now he finds word he's going to be coming back here. So, it does. Maybe we buy that one with seller financing too.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. And then, of course, now he's got his 2 dogs. So is there a way that we could also be looking for a property for him that he could now move into, because it won't need cash flow for him? So it's just having these extra tools to help people out that, again, like the more people who are properly educated, they can really serve the community in different ways. And it's just being creative about it. It's not like, it's recognizing that not everything is going to be black and white, and not everyone can just walk into a bank and get a loan and, have a great day. It's what can we do if that can't happen?
Well, and he's in that spot right now, right? After just closing on the house, if he puts his house on the market and covers the closing costs and commission and all of these things, plus now they're going to be moving him in the next few weeks. So I don't know if he could even afford 2 places, because he mentioned that, his job there has been slowed down a lot lately. So, he's not having all the overtime and things like that. So, in many situations, if I have a seller, they're like, hey, I'm just thinking of selling my house and, I want to know what's worth, and I'm not thinking of whatever, like maybe try selling with an agent. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I love agents, and I think they're really helpful and they serve their spot. But in our guy John's situation, that's not going to help him. Right. And especially in that market where it's a little soft right now. So he just needs quick, easy relief to walk away. And it was no different when we bought his house the first time.
I know.
It was like the same thing. He was getting relocated to the West Coast, wanted to sell it. It was in Lakeland, Florida. He's only owned the house for maybe, it was like 9 months when we spoke to him the first time.
Yeah.
And he says, if I list it on the market and I pay a commission and closing costs, I'm going to have to write a big check to get rid of this property. And I don't have that kind of money. And now I'm having to up and move and spend all these expenses moving across the country. And then lo and behold, he's there for 2 years and it's happening to him again.
Yeah.
So there are these people out
These
there.
Stories, yeah.
And real life situations. And, it's interesting right now. So like, where does this work? Well, it works everywhere. There's not a spot that it doesn't work in the country. Because I found people in North Pole, Alaska, who have a home and they want to sell it because they're making 2 payments and they don't live there anymore. Down to Texas and California and New York and Florida and all these places in between. These people like John exist. And these stories are out there and they exist too. So it's really finding motivated sellers who are in a jam where maybe the traditional route doesn't work. I think of the one we bought in Edgewater, Florida. I mean, that's a 2-year-old house. It's built just 2 years ago. It's new. It doesn't need anything. But the buyers bought it new, didn't have a lot of equity because they didn't put a lot of money down, and they were getting transferred for their job. So the same thing. Where would these sellers, why would they say yes? Sometimes because putting it on the market, sometimes it costs them a lot of money to do that, getting the house ready. But even in this case, when it was a nice house, just paying a commission and closing costs was going to be too much. And I've seen a lot of times sellers come to closing and have to write a big old check just to say, get rid of a property that they don't want anymore.
Not with us, they don't.
Not with us, they don't. But with a lot of other times you put in the market, that happens. So sometimes they could afford it. Sometimes they could float that. Sometimes they can't. And if they can't, that just means maybe we could do business and offer to pay more, right? And put more money into the situation than anybody else can if we're able to get great terms. And so that's what I love what we do, is because you're really creating wins for yourself. You're creating wins for your seller. You're creating wins for so many different people, our future renters or rent to own. Like when you think of you do it the right way, it truly does help people. And where the traditional routes just don't work. And this isn't a house that I could give him some wholesale cash offer where he's going to take a lowball offer, because it doesn't need any work. These are nice houses in nice neighborhoods. They're turnkey, most of them. So when I first was getting into this, that's all I looked for. When somebody was in this situation and they're like, hey, like I'm motivated, like John, he just bought his house and now he's going to get transferred back over here. I'm like, I can't do anything for you. Go list it with an agent. And many of those people said I tried and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything. If an agent can't sell it for you, it must not be able to be done. I just think of all the deals that we left on the table by not knowing this strategy. Mm-hmm. So when banks are saying no, you could still buy real estate. You could still buy cash flowing rentals. This works for your own house too. If you want to buy your own property, I've got a lot of our friends who've found their own deal this way that they've moved into. So you don't have to let banks stop you. And this was a misconception, because I think our generation, I'm a Generation X. I was born in the 70s. You're younger than I am. But if you think of our generation, it was like, get a job, like work real hard, buy a house on the MLS, go to the bank, let them finance it, save up a big down payment. And, that's the American dream, but that's not always the case for everybody. And there's actually a better, smarter way to do it. So this is my favorite strategy by far. I like doing fix and flips. I love the junker houses, and I always will. But there's nothing easier than buying a turnkey house in a beautiful neighborhood that we don't have to hire contractors to go do the clean outs and things like that. I think we might get them cleaned, maybe paint a little bit, but that's really the big part of it there too. So the big thing is you don't need credit. You don't need a credit score. I don't have to have the bank guy call and say, hey, Joe, Jen, I need to have your last 2 years of W-2s and your credit score. And, oh, you open up an account for $200. What happened here? We have to come up with a big notice to the bank because we got some 0% card on something crazy, whatever it was. I remember these instances, and I remember what a pain it is to do this. So the fact you don't need to, you don't have to let that slow you down.
But what do you need to do?
Well,
other than just talk to motivated sellers, I feel like, I think we do need to share, there's a little bit of a learning curve here. It does take time to know what questions to ask, how to properly structure the deal, so it makes sense for both you and the seller. And there's a lot that does go into learning it. But once you learn how these deals can benefit everybody, it by far surpasses being able to go to the banks.
Yeah. And I think the 4 big things I look at is A, do they have a situation? Right? Are they in a situation that we could even help them, first of all? Because many times I'm like, hey, why don't you try listing it? And they're like, I don't want to, or I already did and it didn't work. Right? So I'm always offering that first, but then, okay, there's a situation going on there. Can we agree on the price? What's the monthly payment? Would you be open to doing terms? Right? And I know you probably know the numbers just as good as I do, but I got to look at it probably 100 deals before I could find one that I like. So that means,
I don't know. Lately, I found a couple.
Hey, that's Lexi's doing. That girl is on fire right now. We're writing up a whole lot of deals. She is just in this work zone.
No, but typically I would say, about 100. And then it's staying up and, on your follow-up and making sure that you're circling back and checking in. And even if somebody found a buyer, they probably didn't. So make sure you follow up with that.
Well, that's the exact one of the deals that we're working on. Seller says, hey, we have a deal. Oh, so sorry. Actually, I got somebody else to do it. And I already got my buyer. We've already signed the agreement. I know every time that happens, it stings a little bit, but I'm always well, just follow up because sometimes that might just not happen. If it does, my gosh, they come back and they do, right? And now that opens the door because they just had a bad experience and they know, like, and trust what we're talking about. And they feel like it's a lot easier that time around. So if you're listening to this and you've talked to that motivated seller and you're really close to a deal, then all of a sudden they say, I've sold it to somebody else. Your job is to follow up with them until they close the transaction and everything's been signed and all of the money's been arranged and everything's been done. Up until that happens, you're still going to follow up with them consistently, because if it does fall out of contract, which a lot of these do, it's like 1 out of 5 right now are. So you want to be the constant contact for them, that when it does happen, if it does their deal, they know who they're going to turn to next. And it's going to be you. So I think that's really the key to it. And then, like you mentioned, what does that look like? Man, I'm looking at the price, my monthly payment. How much money do I need to give them to get into the deal? It's a down payment, usually 0 the way we buy, but there's some that need a few bucks. And then how long can we do this for? So Lexi wrote up a seller finance deal yesterday in good old Rochester, New York. So this is rated number 1 in the whole country right now. And the seller had a property, it's a 3-unit, and he desperately wants to sell it quickly. And so his situation was, he's a retired landlord. He's in his late 60s. He doesn't want to have to deal with the city inspections. It does need a little bit of work. All 3 units are rented. He was okay with doing no money down. I think he gave us a 10 or 15-year term. If we could take over his payment of $700 a month, with all 3 units rented, he's pulling in $2,300 a month. So the cash flow is great. It's in definitely a challenging part of town, I will say. It's been a rough neighborhood, but there's a lot of people who love those neighborhoods, a lot of buyers, a lot of people who live there. Somebody might want a house hack, or it might be a landlord, but there's these opportunities that are even in the hottest countries in the market. Why was that? They didn't want to have to deal with the repairs. He didn't want to have to deal with city inspections. He wasn't in a financial spot, but he knew it needed work, and he didn't really have the capital that he wanted to deploy into the property. We were able to pay him a fair price, more than I would if I paid cash for it. He loved his price. He loved that he's going to get the payment off his back. The property's going to be in good hands. It's going to get renovated, made beautiful, get the new updated C of O, and life moves on. So here's just another good example of a deal that just happened yesterday. And the big thing is when a seller reaches out to you and they digitally raise their hand and they've got a real estate problem, I'm going to give our team some credit because that lead came in at 10:50 in the morning. And a few hours later, it was under contract. Lexi got on a call short time after, found that it was a deal, messaged me, is like, hey, I'm going to write this one up. And I think you told her to go write it up. She did this in the group
she
message.
said no money down, 10 years at cash flow. And I was like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah. I think I was like on a call or something. And I look in the text message. I see that from Lexi and I see you're like, write it up. I'm like, yay, good job, everybody. Yeah. And then shortly after, I see the DocuSign go down and I'm like hooting and hollering. I call her right away and she's just jumping off the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but this is, again, like you said, you do look at quite a few deals that don't work. They don't cash flow. The seller wants all the money down up front, and so it's following up, staying organized with all of your leads and treating them all as humans, really asking them the compassionate questions and just trying to figure out if you can point them in the right direction, and then know that if it's not today, then maybe it's down the road when you check back in, and maybe it's not at all. But, just never being rude to any of your sellers, and just like remembering that, yes, you're here to make money, but if you can really help people, like that really changed everything when we just led from the heart and we stopped worrying so much about like numbers and deals, and it was just sort of like, okay, like who can we really help today? And
yeah, because some of these people, like we help a lot of people that we never would make a red penny from. Like we don't make a cent from it. It just sometimes it's like, hey, you got to try this, go do this, you call this person, they could help you. Yep. Right. So it's pointing the folks in the right direction. I wish we could buy all the houses, but we can't. But we do what we can and help the rest. So I love it. And that's the win-win of real estate. And I always say when you do real estate right, like everybody should win. So it's just taking that consistent action. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to do this too. The first thing is you got to understand, like, why are you doing this? Like, why? What is your why? Is it financial freedom? Is it you want to buy your own house for you and your family or for yourself? Is it that I want to scale a rental portfolio? Like, why is it that you want to do this? And for me, I didn't want to sit stuck at a job all day long, sitting in office. I want to be around my wife all day long and my kids and to homeschool and to travel. And now to live in Florida for almost 3 years, like my mind is blown.
You really just want to work in the garage.
I do work in the garage, but it's sunny. It's beautiful. I get to wave to all my neighbors and say hi and talk to all of them as I'm getting work done. But this was my why. This is what I wanted to do that. I thought it was my like grandeur vision. One day when I'm like 60, I could, own all these properties, like walk away from the dealership. But being able to do that at 42, 5 years ago, you could add 5 years to that, 42, and know how old I am now. But, to be able to do it back then and do it consistently, it's been my lifelong dream. I'm doing it way younger than I thought I ever could. And it's been a complete blessing. So figure out what your why is. Why do you want to do this for you? Because there is a lot of sacrifice and it looks great on camera. Guys, you got to put in that work.
I was going to say, like, you wake up in the morning and you were in a CRM and you were messaging sellers yourself sometimes. And even last Sunday, you're putting in work when most people have the day off. So there's a lot of work that does go behind the scenes.
Yeah. I also love what I get to do. So it is my work, my job, but it's also my hobby and my pleasure. So the fact that I could do that and I can make an income from, I haven't had a job in 5 years. Mm-hmm. So
but the cool thing is, that is cool. But I was going to say too, like you can go as fast or as slow as you want too. So if you just want one property this year, like go for it. If you want one a month, there's that too, or more. So it's just whatever you can put into it and grow it as you can.
Yeah. And if you're frustrated with these interest rates, if you're frustrated because these huge down payments and those things are stopping you from buying real estate, it doesn't have to, and it won't any longer. You just need to start doing what we're talking about. So if you want to learn more about how this works, or if you've got questions, obviously we love to help people. We do all types of trainings and 5-hour live videos that I do on once a month, trainings on how to exactly do this. Guys, send us a message and we'd love to connect. I love to do deals. I'm a deal maker, a deal hunter. And if there's a deal to be made out of it, that's what I love to do. So if we could help, we would love to.
Absolutely.
Drop it, girl. It's up to you now.
Up to me.
Yep. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This Creative Finance Playbook. I am your host, Joe.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi. And this is Jen, and we will see you guys soon. Thank you so much.